Welcome to 6 Degrees of Wiki, a podcast where two sisters find the 6 degrees of separation between Wikipedia articles that don't seem to have anything in common. I'm Nikki.
And I'm Rosanna. Today we'll fall into a Wikipedia spiral where Nikki has just 6 rounds to figure out how the first article could possibly be connected to the last, while learning all sorts of peculiar facts along the way. Let's get started. So far this month, we've spiraled from Cate Blanchett to Doppelgänger.
Round 1.
Today, we are spiraling from Doppelgänger to Shirley Jackson. A doppelganger is a person that looks just like another, but non-biologically related person. Shirley Jackson was an American writer known for horror and mystery.
Oh.
Do you see anything that these 2 degrees have in common?
I do. Doppelgangers show up in a lot of supernatural fiction. Or is it fiction, really? And she writes horror, and you would think that doppelgangers might show up there. So maybe she wrote about doppelgangers, and this is like a 1 degree show, and we're done.
It's not 6 degrees anymore, it's just 1 degree.
And it's over.
So like we talked about doppelganger in the last episode, they are often seen as ghostly or a paranormal phenomenon and seen as a harbinger of bad luck. Here are some historical examples of doppelgangery.
I'm glad you've started using my made-up word.
It's a good word. Poet John Donne saw his wife's doppelganger in 1612, the same night as the stillbirth of their daughter.
Oh,
yeah.
That's just depressing.
Playwright Goethe wrote in his autobiography that he passed his doppelganger while they were both on horseback, which is really weird.
I'm surprised they didn't stop.
Would you? I would have been terrified. So some fiction that included doppelgangers in their stories. There's a short story called William Wilson by Edgar Allan Poe. There's also a doppelganger in A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and in Vertigo by Alfred Hitchcock.
All these stories I have not read.
I know, me neither. Interesting fact about doppelgangers. Autoscopy is a term used in psychiatry and neurology for the hallucination of seeing one's own body at a distance. It can occur as a symptom of schizophrenia and epilepsy, and is considered to be a possible explanation for the doppelganger phenomena.
Round 2.
All right, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is?
Well, I think you're tricking me because he had some horror writers in there.
Did I?
I mean, Poe seems like a big influence for a lot of modern writers and mystery writers. And I know that's probably not it, but I'm going with Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay. Your guess of Edgar Allan Poe is incorrect.
Okay.
The next degree is paranormal.
Paranormal. I like paranormal. Let's do it.
Paranormal events are a phenomenon that appears in pop culture, in fiction, and other non-scientific works. It describes something that is outside the normal experience or beyond a scientific explanation. Paranormal phenomenon are not the same as a hypothetical concept like dark matter or dark energy, because those ideas are based on observations and experimental data obtained through the use of the scientific method. Paranormal study is considered pseudoscience. The most popular paranormal beliefs include ghosts, aliens, UFOs, extrasensory perception, cryptids, and psychic abilities.
It's in that list, isn't it? The next degree.
Is it? Ghosts refer to a deceased person's spirit. Evidence for the existence of ghosts is anecdotal, but a lot of people have always believed that they're real. The possibility of alien life is not by itself a paranormal subject. It becomes paranormal when you bring in the belief of actual UFOs, because there's no proof that UFOs aren't earthly. Cryptids describe animals that cannot be confirmed as existing, but cryptid sightings have been documented over centuries. And the most popular include the Loch Ness Monster that we've talked about, the Mothman, and Bigfoot. Bigfoot being our local mascot, because we're in the Pacific Northwest. The study of paranormal is difficult because there's usually no acceptable evidence to support the claims. If a claim is able to be tested by the scientific method, it has to be reclassified as science, because you can test it.
Oh.
There are 3 approaches to studying the paranormal. One is anecdotal, which is a collection of stories about paranormal events from, we'll say, eyewitnesses. Another is participant, so an observer investigating by immersing themselves into the subject they're studying to gain a better understanding of the subject. So like someone going into a supposed haunted house and getting EMF recordings, they're observing. There are also skeptical scientific investigations where someone attempts to apply the scientific method to a paranormal claim to try to reach a rational explanation. This method can be summarized by the application of Occam's razor. So the solution with the fewest assumptions will be the correct one. The James Randi Educational Foundation has something called the $1 Million Challenge. The founder, James Randi, offered a prize of $1 million to anyone that could demonstrate evidence of any paranormal, supernatural, or occult power or event under test conditions agreed upon by both parties. Despite many declarations of supernatural ability, the prize has never been claimed.
I bet a lot of people who make money off of their paranormal practices wouldn't even try because they don't want to be debunked.
Right, of course not. They're like, I don't need a test or that money. I know I'm right. Even though no one can prove it, a large majority of people do believe in the paranormal. A Gallup poll estimated that 70% of people in the U.S. believe that the government is covering up the existence of UFOs.
Oh, wow.
About 60% of people surveyed believe in some form of ESP. Then in another survey, 70% of respondents believe they had seen, heard, or been touched by an animal or person that they knew was not there. And 80% reported having had a premonition. 50% said that they could recall a previous life.
Round 3.
All right, Nikki. We're moving along very well. What do you think the next degree is?
All right, I'm stuck between psychic abilities and Bigfoot.
Okay. I mean, who isn't?
Yes, of course. I want to learn more about both of them. I'm trying to get to Shirley Jackson. For some reason, Bigfoot doesn't seem like a horror-type creature to me. He seems possibly gentle. I guess to me, he seems less scary than psychic abilities being real.
And that is literally based on your viewing of Harry and the Hendersons, right?
Well, of course.
Of course.
So I'm going with psychic abilities.
Psychic abilities. All right. Your guess of psychic abilities is close, but incorrect.
That's close? Okay, I'll take it.
The next degree is extrasensory perception, or ESP.
Oh, that was next on my list.
Mm-hmm. So ESP has also been called a sixth sense or a second sight. So ESP involves claims of reception to information that was not gained through a recognized physical sense, but a sense of the mind, and can include intuition, clairvoyance, retrocognition, and telepathy.
What's retrocognition?
It's like seeing things that happened in the past that you weren't there for.
Oh, okay.
The scientific community rejects ESP due to the lack of evidence and lack of theory. In the 30s, there was a couple, J.B. and Louisa Rhine, who investigated ESP at Duke University. Louisa collected accounts of spontaneous cases, and then J.B. worked in the lab designing experiments to test the definitions that he was coming up with. They developed a set of ESP cards that had symbols on them, like circle, square, cross, star. And then the test was that the sender looks at the card, and then the receiver has to guess the symbol that the sender is looking at. Academics challenged the concepts and the evidence when they attempted to repeat the experiments, They were unsuccessful, sadly.
It was the government covering it up. They didn't want them to know.
You know, there could be some truth to that. I mean, the next degree is not conspiracy theory, but I mean, it could have been. Psychologist Joseph Jastrow wrote that the Rhines evidence was anecdotal, biased, and dubious. Which is like he really called him out. I mean...
Yeah.
Rhine was also accused of cheating to get the results that he wanted.
Oh.
Here's an interesting fact about the Rhines experiments. They also did experiments to test for psychokinesis with dice.
Round 4.
All right, Nikki, what do you think the next degree is?
I don't know if it's too close to ESP, but clairvoyance and psychokinesis jumped out at me.
Mm-hmm.
Psychokinesis sounds really cool, so I'm going to guess psychokinesis.
Okay.
That's moving things with your mind, right?
It is.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Your guess of psychokinesis is also very close, but not correct.
Oh, what was it?
The next degree is retrocognition.
Oh, no, it is not.
It is.
I even asked about that one.
I know. Whew, I was like, oh no, she's on to me. But you were not on to me.
I was not.
Retrocognition is the knowledge of a past event which could not have been learned or inferred by normal means.
Okay.
A popularly celebrated case of retrocognition were the visions in 1901 of Annie Moberly and Eleanor Jourdain. They were two scholars and administrators for the British University Education for Women. They got lost trying to find their way to Marie Antoinette's private chateau and believed that they came upon the Queen's presence itself. They were convinced that the person they saw and spoke to was Marie Antoinette, and they wrote about it in An Adventure in 1911 and described details of her dress, the accents, and architecture told to them by the Queen based on her memories of her last days there in 1789.
I'm just imagining somewhere at the same time there was a woman whose job it was to dress up like Marie Antoinette and walk around the grounds to talk to tourists. Said, I met these really weird two women. They were lost.
Yeah, it seems reasonable that it was just like some sort of costume weekend. The book that these women wrote was dismissed by Eleanor Sidgwick, who was a leading member of the British Society for Psychic Research. She claimed that this was a mutual confabulation, which means a disturbance of memory defined as the production of fabricated, distorted, or misinterpreted memories about oneself or the world without the conscious intent to deceive. That's what a confabulation is. You misremembered accidentally.
Well, that's why police don't want eyewitnesses to talk to each other before they get their statement.
Yeah, human memory is like the least reliable thing there is.
So bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I, just based on experience, know that that is true. Here's an interesting fact about retrocognition. It shows up in fictional TV characters like Phoebe Hallowell from Charmed, Alison Dubois from Medium, and Emery Waterman from the miniseries Rose Red.
Round 5.
All right, Nikki, we have a couple more degrees to go to get to Shirley Jackson. What do you think the next degree is?
This is going to be a weird guess.
Okay.
But I can kind of connect them.
Sure.
Also, I loved the TV show Medium.
Great show.
Yes. It was such a good show. Patricia Arquette was great. And the whole show was so much fun to watch, and I loved the characters. And it is a kind of media. And Shirley Jackson wrote a book, which is another kind of media.
That's
and
true.
they both have paranormal kind of feelings to them.
Definitely.
So maybe there's some sort of connection. So I'm going with the TV show Medium.
Okay. Your guess of the TV show Medium is close, but incorrect.
Really? I thought that was going to be completely off.
You're doing the same thing I did last month, where it was like Just to the left or the right every time.
Yeah.
The next degree is the mini-series Rose Red.
Of course it is. I've never seen that.
Oh, really? It's something.
Does that mean it's bad?
Let's just talk about it.
Okay.
So, Rose Red was an American television miniseries from 2002 that was scripted by Stephen King and starred Nancy Travis, the woman from 3 Men and a Baby, and Emily Deschanel from Bones, and Stephen King as the pizza delivery man. And other people, too.
It's so weird when people are in their own movies.
I know. It was filmed in Seattle. The story is a loose remake of the 1963 film The Haunting, which was loosely based on the 1959 novel The Haunting of Hill House. Stephen King pitched the idea as a feature film to Steven Spielberg in 1996, but then revised it to a TV miniseries after a film called The Haunting was released in 1999. They didn't want to do a movie after they had just done a movie. Rose Red had a $200,000 marketing campaign and included a campaign to make the fictional mansion and its history seem like a true story. They created a fake website for the fictional Beaumont University and a fake novel that was supposedly written by one of the characters. The story is about a haunted mansion in Lakewood, Washington, named Rose Red, built on the site of Native American burial ground in 1906. The house has a long history of supernatural events and unexplained tragedies, so a parapsychologist and a team of psychics go to the house to investigate. So the investigative team shows up at the house. They accidentally wake up the evil spirit that's possessing the house.
Oops.
Hijinks ensue. Here's an interesting fact about the Rose Red miniseries. It stars my doppelganger, Kimberly J. Brown, as Annie Wheaton.
Hey!
Round 6.
All right, Nikki, this is the last one. What do you think the next degree is?
I have a really weird combination of items I have tried to decide between here.
Awesome. Let's hear them.
Trying to pick between Seattle,
Okay.
Emily Deschanel, and Native American burial ground.
Ah, love it. Okay.
Yeah, none of them seem to be similar to any others. I kind of want to go with Emily Deschanel because she was on Bones, and that somehow weirdly got some paranormal stuff going on, which didn't make any sense because she was a scientist. Anyway. But I'm going to go with Native American burial ground because I feel like so many horror stories start with that.
Okay.
With something being built on top of a Native American burial ground.
I know, people really need to be more careful. Your guess of Native American burial ground is not even close this time. It is incorrect.
Were any of my ideas close?
Would you like to guess again?
Oh my gosh. Should I stick to my list? I'm going to guess Emily Deschanel.
Incorrect.
Seattle?
Incorrect.
Precognate.
Incorrect.
I give up.
All right.
What is it?
The next degree is The Haunting of Hill House.
Oh. I did not write that one down.
The Haunting of Hill House is a 1959 Gothic horror novel by American author Shirley Jackson.
Of course it is. For some reason, I assumed that was written by Stephen King, because
that does make sense. Yeah, and I could have mentioned that it was written by her in the last degree, but I decided to leave that part out.
Yeah, that's probably smart. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got me my amazing guess of Native American burial ground.
And all the guesses that followed.
Hey, we don't need to talk about those.
This novel was a finalist for the National Book Award and is considered to be one of the best literary ghost stories published in the 20th century.
Ooh, I need to read it.
The novel relies on terror instead of horror and utilizes complex relationships between the characters and the events in the house. The plot, as you may have guessed, is similar to the Rose Red miniseries. Dr. Montague, an investigator, hopes to find scientific evidence of the existence of the supernatural. He rents this house for the summer and invites people that have had past experiences with paranormal events. One is Eleanor, a young woman that cared for her invalid mother, and Theodora, a bohemian, possibly lesbian artist. The other characters are Luke Sanderson, who is the heir to the house, and then the two caretakers, Mr. and Mrs. Dudley, who won't stay in the house at night because they're smart. Strange events that happen in the house include unseen noises, ghosts roaming the halls, and strange writings appearing on the walls, which sounds a lot like Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. The novel has been adapted for 2 movies, both of them called The Haunting, and the miniseries, and it's also been made into a play. Here's an interesting fact about The Haunting of Hill House. In 2017, it was announced that Mike Flanagan would be adapting the novel into a television series for Netflix, which sounds awesome.
Yes.
And that leads us to Shirley Jackson.
Okay.
Shirley Jackson was an American writer known for horror and mystery. She wrote 6 novels, 2 memoirs, and over 200 short stories. She lived from 1916 to 1965.
That's not very long.
No. She's been cited as an influence for many modern authors like Stephen King and Neil Gaiman. She published her first novel, The Road Through the Wall, and her most famous story, The Lottery, both in 1948.
I remember reading that in school.
Yet she was actually really surprised at the outrage that happened after she published The Lottery. Over 300 letters were sent to The New Yorker about it. People were freaking out.
Wow.
She said the purpose was to shock the reader with a graphic dramatization of the pointless violence and general inhumanity in their own lives. And people actually were asking her, where was this town and could they go watch?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's creepy.
Critics' response, however, was pretty much all positive, and The Lottery was adapted for TV in 1952. From 1951 to 1959, she published several more books, just in those 8 years. One is called Hangsman. The story included elements similar to the real disappearance of an 18-year-old girl, Paula Jean Weldon, which is still unsolved case to this day. She also wrote The Bird's Nest, which was a story about a woman with multiple personalities and her relationship with her psychiatrist. She wrote The Sundial, which is a story of a woman who falls victim to her domineering mother-in-law. And then she also wrote a book called Life Among the Savages, which is actually a collection of short stories based on her life with her 4 children. And then in 1959, she wrote The Haunting of Hill House and a 1-act musical called The Bad Children, based on Hansel and Gretel. 3 years after she died, Jackson's husband, Stanley Hyman, released Come Along With Me, which was a book that contained her last unfinished novel and 14 previously uncollected short stories, plus 3 lectures she had given. Then, in 1996, a crate of unpublished stories was found in a barn behind her house, and some of those stories were published in a collection called Just an Ordinary Day. The Shirley Jackson Awards were established in 2007, and they're given for outstanding achievement in the literature of psychological suspense and horror, and that award is presented at ReaderCon, which apparently is a sci-fi convention in Boston that I've never heard of that now I need to go to.
Yeah, definitely.
It's called ReaderCon.
That is right up our alleys.
Exactly.
Our collective alley.
Our joint alley. And we have made it through all 6 degrees. We went from Doppelgänger to Paranormal to Extrasensory Perception to Retrocognition to Rose Red to The Haunting of Hill House to Shirley Jackson. Nikki, what did you think of this spiral?
I really liked it. I mean, you know me, I'm a sucker for paranormal stuff.
I know you are.
Even though I don't know if I believe it or not.
It's fun to think about it.
It is really fun just to wonder what might be true. And it was neat finding out all the information about her stories, which now I have to go read a whole bunch of them.
Now it's time for Cheek of the Week. This week, our cheek is reasons you should be visiting your local library.
Is reason number 1 to go find all your Shirley Jackson books and short stories?
As a matter of fact, it is.
I got one thing right in this episode.
Or any other author that you might be interested in. We've mentioned several over the course of this show. Also, another thing that's great about the library is you could go get books by Shirley Jackson, or you could borrow the TV shows and movies based on Shirley Jackson's work. Because at the library, you can get free books, free DVDs of TV shows and movies. You can get CDs with music. They have every kind of media, and you don't have to pay for any of it.
And ebooks, too.
And ebooks. You don't even have to actually go to the library to utilize your library services.
I love that my library lets me request ebooks that they don't have, and then if they buy them, I'm automatically put on the waiting list, and so I get it as soon as it comes.
That's awesome. And I live in a small town, as I think I've mentioned before, and so my library doesn't have every book that I'm interested in, but I can get pretty much any book through interlibrary loaners. So if there's a book that I want that a library 3 towns over has, they will mail it to my library, and I can check it out. Nice. And then when I'm done, they mail it back.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. Another great reason to visit the library is just personal development. Going to the library encourages reading and exploration in adults and in children. It's really important for children to go to the library.
And if you have any sort of learning disability, you can get audiobooks too. So you don't have to worry about actually reading it on the page. That will get you through the book just as well.
Also, studies have shown that students who visit the library tend to have better test scores than those that don't. Libraries have free Wi-Fi, free computer use, free adult classes, and free air conditioning.
Ooh, that's a great reason to go.
Also, my library has tons of events and programs for children and adults that are all free. They're all free. Nice. Once a month, my library has an adult DIY where you just show up and you do a project that one of the librarians pretty much found on Pinterest. We paint pictures. We created flowers out of pine cones. We did a Harry Potter wreath one time. All free. They bring in authors and artists that have free shows and free readings. There's story time for kids at every library. They do family films sometimes where everybody can just come watch a movie. And then our library, and I'm sure most do too, have a young adult club, so teenagers. And they talk about books, they do like a book club, but then they also do like trivia nights, and there are prizes.
And one of the best things about libraries are the librarians. They're not just people who can help you find a book. They are trained researchers, and they can help you find anything about anything. It's amazing.
Oh, my library also has a bullet journal club.
Oh.
Which, if you're into bullet journals like I am, it's awesome. Also, libraries are quiet. If you need to get away, if you need a break, if you need to work on something uninterrupted, library is a great place to go. I can't stress enough what a great resource the library is, because you don't need any money to utilize it. So please check out your local library. They're going to have a website. Every library does. They'll tell you what their programs are, what's coming up. Just walk in, just talk to somebody. They love to talk to you. And take your kids. That's my public service announcement for libraries. That's our episode. Tune in next time for another 6 Degrees of Wiki. You can keep up with us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6 Degrees of Wiki.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can support the show by leaving a review, buying 6 Degrees of Wiki merch like t-shirts, mugs, and bags, or even by donating directly to the show at 6degreesofwiki.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.